Whenever you see a Rolex watch, what comes to mind? Class, luxury, extravagance. Well, these are some of the words that people have associated with the Rolex brand over the decades. However, the high cost of a Rolex watch means that only the most affluent people in our society can afford them. This has left some of us wondering if Rolex watches are worth their high price, or if it's just for show. In this video, we will be putting the grandeur Rolex watch under our lens to understand why they are exclusive to the 1%. We promise you, this will be an interesting ride, so can you hit the like and subscribe button in advance? Thanks. Here's a fun mystery before we start the video. A famous rumor states that a Rolex can only leave the workshop if it's recognizable from 20 feet away. Rolex watches have been the favorite of several well-known celebrities decade after decade. The long list includes popular names such as John F. Kennedy, Barack Obama, Elvis Presley, Tiger Woods, Paul Newman, and many, many more. But Rolex watches aren't just the jewels of celebrities, they've also played essential roles in the cinema world. For example, the legendary James Bond got assistance from his Rolex watches in his earlier movies. Sean Connery was able to track down Dr. No in 1962 thanks to a Rolex Submariner 6358. Also in 1989, a Rolex Submariner Day-Date was famously worn by Timothy Dalton in A License to Kill. Talk about diversity. Factors affecting pricing. Rolex watches are priced based on their collection and model. The high cost of the watches doesn't mean the company won't love to see watches on the wrist of everyone.
Rock solid, and it has a 5mm extension on the clasp. The finishing isn't up to Grand Seiko standard.
You have to consider the materials and resources used in making them. However, these are just two of the factors that determine the pricing of Rolex watches. In 2018, Dalton's Rolex 16610 was put up for auction by an auction house in Birmingham, England. The value of the Rolex Submariner was estimated between $80,000 to $120,000, a tad over my budget. A luxury model such as the Rolex Oyster Steel can be purchased for about $5,000. However, if you wish to buy a top Rolex watch, you will have to pay a price at least as close to the auction price of Dalton's watch. Now, let's explore the several reasons behind the prices of Rolex watches. 90 FL stainless steel, commonly known as the Oyster Steel. Luxury watches made by Rolex come with a classic and peerless design that enables them to stand out. An essential component of this design is a 90 FL stainless steel. This material is more durable and attractive than the 316L steel used by the company's competitors. Aside from being expensive, 90 FL steel is also difficult to manufacture. The material is also known as corrosion-resistant alloy, and it was not fully used by Rolex until 2003. Since Rolex manufactures all products in-house, it had to replace the majority of its equipment and machines to be able to manufacture 90 FL steel. A whole lot of work and special skills are also needed for the process. As a result, the majority of watchmakers are still making use of 316L steel today, while Rolex is ahead with their revolutionary Oyster Steel. Several research facilities. The internal research and development department at Rolex is truly remarkable. Several labs and facilities are dedicated to the development of new products and production techniques. The company goes to great lengths to ensure that only the best scientists are on its team. For instance, only the most qualified scientists can be found in the lab, where research is done on the lubricants used by Rolex machines. Another important facility used by Rolex is a stress test room. This is where extreme tests are carried out on watch movements, cases, and bracelets. One of many stress tests include the crash test. The watch had to pass 20 different drop tests before their launch. Another test conducted on Rolex watches are the deep sea tank test. A high-performance sea tank adds 1.3 tons of force onto the watch, simulating the pressure at 16,000 below sea level. A bit extreme in my opinion, but the company has standards and it sticks to them. Additionally, there is a room in which various gas spectrometers and electron microscopes can be found. Research is done on different materials in this room. Mechanization. As one of the foremost watchmakers in the world, Rolex has continuously invested in different types of machines, including robots. The robots are used for continuous actions like packaging, assembly, and retrieval of components. In addition to that, the robots initially polish Rolex watches before the process is completed by the real workers. Hand-assembled movements. Though Rolex utilizes robots during the production of its watches, the tasks assigned to the machines are the simpler ones. More essential tasks, such as the assembly of movements and bracelets, are done by hand. Before the watches undergo chronometer certification, they're usually tested by humans to guarantee top quality. Water impermeability test. Rolex watches are known and loved for their impressive impermeability. I would like you to know that some Rolex watches have water resistance up to 300 meters. A good example of such a watch is the Rolex Submariner watch. A team of gemologists. This is the one you've been waiting for. In a bid to ensure that Rolex users get only the best quality of luxury watches, they have employed a large team of highly qualified gemologists. The gemologists handle processes such as buying the precious materials, testing them intensely, molding them, and setting gems onto luxurious watches.
Here's where 20 master technicians pre-assemble individual components.
Rolex also hires traditional jewelers to offer their expertise during the hand-picking and hand-setting of precious stones, such as diamonds and gold. Their famous presidential bracelet lineup exclusively holds Rolex watches with precious stones in them. The presidential bracelet received its name in 1965 when US President Lyndon B. Johnson wore a yellow gold day date. Thereafter, it was dubbed the President's Watch. Gold production. Rolex is the only watchmaker in the world that produces its gold. So, it shouldn't be a surprise that some gold models are among the most valuable watches in the market. Rolex produces 18K white, yellow, or ever-rose gold by refining 24K gold. Rolex watches are long-lasting. If you will be spending thousands of dollars on any item, it's only natural that you will want it to stand the test of time. Rolex watches do not disappoint in this regard. Anyone looking for a watch that will retain its quality regardless of use and abuse won't find a better watch than a Rolex. Fluctuations in environmental conditions, such as temperature, humidity, and altitude, can easily damage other luxury watches. This shouldn't be a surprise if you've been paying attention since the beginning of this video. A good proof of the quality of Rolex watches is the achievement of Edmund Hillary. In 1953, Edmund reached the summit of Mount Everest with a Rolex Oyster Perpetual on his wrist. Also in 1994, Ed Viestas conquered Mount Everest while putting on a Rolex Explorer 2. Ed continues to wear the watch till today. Rolex will do anything for perfection. Aside from movement assembly, Rolex goes to great lengths to ensure that every part of its watch is perfect, including the screws. As expected of an industry leader like Rolex, the entire process of the production of the watches is quality controlled. For instance, the margin of error allowed for the Rolex bezel's handles on some watches don't exceed a quarter of the thickness of a hair. The company makes about 800,000 watches per year, and the quality of each watch is guaranteed to be worth its price. What's more, you can be assured that an original Rolex watch will retain its value on the resale market. Rolex watches used to be much cheaper. A lot of people may not know this, but Rolex watches used to be much cheaper when the company started production in the 1950s. However, the brand grew rapidly and the price of its watches increased with it. According to reports, a Rolex Submariner was priced at about $150 in the 50s. Should that be adjusted for inflation, it would cost around $1,460 today. For comparison, the cheapest Rolex watches today will send you back at about $5,000. Also, people are more likely to purchase Rolex worth around $8,000 to $12,000. Conclusion: though Rolex watches may seem to be very expensive when compared to other brands, they're worth much more than you think. You may think of Rolex watches as just practical objects, but the company actually brings engineering and watchmaking together. Rolex watches are the darlings of collectors, and they're always ready to break the bank for these watches. You should know that the most expensive watch ever sold at an auction was a Rolex Daytona. The watch, which was formerly owned by Paul Newman, was sold for $17.8 million. It shattered the record set by Patek Philippe and Baudin Rolex. Both watches were sold for $11 million and $5 million respectively. The Rolex Daytona is solid proof of the great value in the Rolex brand. In the end, the answer to the "why are Rolex watches so expensive" question is quite simple. All you have to do is take a look at their history, craftsmanship, cost of production, and the amount of time dedicated to the production of each piece. So, there you have it. Now, the long-lasting question has been answered. Do you think the Rolex is worth the money? And if you could get any model, which one would it be? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Now, if you don't mind me, I'm going to drive over to my local Rolex shop and get my hands on a presidential Rolex. As always, I'm the Lord of Luxury, and I'll see you in the next video.